Go to the phones on the BetUS caller line. Use promo code SICK'EM125 for a 125% bonus on accounts over $100 or more on BetUS.com. Let's go to Matt in D.C. Matt, thanks for your call.
Hey, guys. How's it going?
Doing great.
I think you're right about this. I mean, the fans really don't want it, and it got me thinking about, like, the super conferences. Imagine if the NFL, for whatever reason, realigned the divisions to, like, every team that has the most Super Bowls, and you had a super conference of like Patriots, Niners, Steelers, and Cowboys. I would hate that division because I want to play the Eagles and Skins and Giants every year because that's like the Big 12. I want to play Texas. I want to play A&M Tech. I want to play who I've been growing up with playing, our rivals. I mean, the fans in the NFL would lose their damn minds if they sort of started to realign like the best viewed teams in the divisions, and then the other teams got moved around. That'd be horrible. But you know what? We're going to be all right. And since it is Friday, my pitch for realignment, since there's really no bad ideas for the Big 12 right now, is I say, you know what? Let's just go get the best team out of each of the Grand of Five. So we take a few of the AAC, like Cincinnati, Memphis, UCF. Let's see who we got in the Conference USA. Take the best Conference USA. So let's bring Louisiana Tech in, best of the Sun Belt, Louisiana, Boise State, and then I was kind of confused on who we take out of the MAC, so I'm just going to go with Northern Illinois. What do y'all think?
Well, look, that's as reasonable an idea as anybody's come up with, or that, I mean, that's, again, we don't know. I mean, we don't know anything that's going to happen. I think that's what's the disheartening thing for most folks is just that there's no, it's been good for our show that we can sit there and speculate about what's going to happen, Craig, but I can't give anybody an answer.
No, I don't think anybody really thinks that we can give them an answer because no one has it, not even the people in charge of these decisions. But, I mean, as far as your idea goes, because that's what a lot of people are doing, they're just throwing out ideas and seeing what might make sense. That's great, but get ready to play like on Tuesday nights and Thursday nights and get ready to make probably a third of the money that you're making right now and pretty much have a guarantee you'll never sniff the playoff. What else would you automatically have happen if you joined with those schools? I mean, because that's going to happen because there's no interest in the schools that you mentioned in terms of the upper tier of college football. Now, like I said earlier, if that's your only option, if that's what you have to do to stay relevant, to stay alive, then hey, I'm not trying to like thumb my nose at anybody. So when we had like somebody yesterday of like, well, isn't it interesting about the Big 12 schools? They were thumbing their noses at the Cincinnatis and the Memphises and all those schools, and now look at them. They're practically going to have to beg those schools to join them or whatever. And I get that, and that's a fair point. But at the same time, I'm looking at it from the viewpoint of where they are right now, Baylor, let's use them in particular, and what you would prefer. I don't prefer joining a conference with Louisiana Lafayette and the schools that you scheduled to beat up on guaranteed in your first or second game of the year, because that's basically what you would be doing. You'd be joining some schools like that now with like the Dakotas and all. Like there's a wild card in there, every few teams or so. But yeah, I mean, if that's their best option, cool. Like, they're not going to have much of a choice, but I would hope that they can hold out and hopefully have some people in their corner that or alliance in the Big 12 that would lead to maybe a bit stronger. But, the plucking from one conference, the only thing about that is, I mean, then that just creates mass chaos around the entire country because all of a sudden 5 conferences are going to have to go and figure out how to reconfigure their own, conference alignment. So that would have a pretty massive, not a critical domino effect because you're not like toppling the SEC and rearranging the ACC, but you would be rearranging all of the group of 5 conferences, and I think that would have some collateral damage to it. But yeah, I mean, interesting idea, and like I said, if that's what they had in front of them and that was the best option, then sure, why not?
All right, let's go to Miami. Adam, you're on the BetUS caller line.
Hi, this is Anthony. I'm a first-time caller to your show. So what I'm wondering, I was reading an article. I was reading somewhere where apparently even after they added Texas and Oklahoma, the SEC, they were talking to the ACC for a merger and stuff like that. How would that have worked? What would have, let's say they followed through with the second part, merging with the ACC. What would have happened? Like, what would the domino effect of that have been if it was true that they were going to merge with the ACC after they got Texas and Oklahoma.
Well, that would have made a 30-team conference, which pretty much takes the entire Eastern Seaboard straight through, to Austin, Texas. I mean, that's a huge conference, and that would have been like the mini NFL, like Craig's been talking about. Like, there's 30 teams, and the scheduling would have kind of. I mean, who knows how they would have had to have a scheduling model like the NFL does, where you play this division one year and you play inside your division. It would have been. Anthony, I think that would have been even harder to wrap my head around. Would have been those things, and then what do you do about playing schools in the Big 10 or Big 12 or Pac-12 after that when you've got a 30-team league?
Yeah, Anthony, thanks for the first-time call, man. Shout out to the MIA. Love Miami. It depends on which rumor you're talking about, because there was the rumor that they would poach potentially like Clemson and Florida State and maybe a couple of other schools, probably North Carolina, and I would imagine that maybe Miami would have been involved in that as well. So there was that rumor. Now, that rumor basically would have been the SEC's Big 12 move on the ACC. Let's take their top brands and their top money earners and let's bring them into the fold. So if they went that direction, that would obviously have a massive fallout on the ACC, the way that the Big 12 is reeling now with Texas and Oklahoma. If you're the ACC and you still had Boston College and NC State and Duke and several other schools, that's still okay, but it's not the same as when you had also North Carolina and Florida State and your big dog Clemson that are bringing in most of the money. So if that were to be the scenario, then all of a sudden I think you're looking at maybe a school like Baylor or West Virginia or some schools like that. Maybe there's a Big 12 ACC alliance and they just fold into that. Or maybe Baylor or West Virginia are a couple of the teams that the ACC plucks to replace Clemson in them. But to the other scenario, the one you're talking about of just a mass melding, I don't know why that would be of interest to the SEC, because then you're dragging along some brands that really aren't of much interest to you at the lower tier. And you already, have kind of streamlined this thing to where like somehow Vandy's in the party, even though they're the biggest outlier as far as successes go in football. And that's what we're talking about is football. But just a mass, I think if you saw just the ACC and the SEC combined, the next thing you would see is the Pac-12 and the Big 10 combined. Yeah. That's what you would see. And we would basically turn into the left half of the country, just take like a not even a sideways, but what would you call it? Like, I don't know, just cut the country in half sideways, basically, and you would have your AFC and your NFC. Mm-hmm. It would be the Pac-12, Big 10 on one side, and it would be the SEC, ACC on the other, and then you'd sprinkle in whoever's remaining from the Big 12, and that's probably what you would end up with. I don't know that anybody wants something as mass, as that, as far as just giant conferences or two giant massive conferences. But hey, either scenario is obviously one that would have an immense amount of fallout. So depending on which one you're talking about, just the simple plucking of a few, then that has effects everywhere. A mass plucking of an entire conference or a conference merger, then yeah, I think that just full steam ahead on basically turning into the NFL.
Yeah, the other thing is that's a really tough thing to sell when the 30 teams you have. I mean, I just see the promo now. Thank you for watching Oklahoma versus Florida. Please stay tuned for Vanderbilt versus Duke.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, that's a tough, it's
not even cool in basketball.
It's an easy thing to sell at the top, hey, I heard you like steak. Do you also like Vienna sausage? Like, that's what that is. I mean, so it's hard. It's not, you're not serving off the same menu.
I mean, there's some schools that would be attractive, obviously. I mean, there's a lot of good schools in the ACC, but I don't know if the SEC wants Wake Forest. I mean, I think they'd be interested in Virginia Tech, but do they want Syracuse? I don't know, maybe the New York market. Like, I don't know what their rational thinking is. And plus, the ACC's got to figure out the Notre Dame thing first. I mean, before that gets figured out, then, and their their contract situation, I mean, there's a lot that would have to happen for anything to happen with the ACC, too. Yeah. A lot would have to happen and change behind the scenes for anything involving the ACC to really have some traction to it.
Yeah. All right, let's go to Lubbock. Bill in Lubbock, thanks for your call. You're on the BetUS caller line.
Hey, great to talk to you guys. Great show.
Thank you.
Just found you a couple of weeks ago. Good job. I'm a Baylor graduate. Been living in Lubbock. Hey, I think we need to start playing three-dimensional chess here instead of two-dimensional. The economic impact of this to Lubbock is substantial. We get $10 million a weekend when we have Texas in town. So if we don't have a competitive product on the field that brings the locals out, and we don't have a market that's going to come to town and travel, like is Washington State going to come to town and meet our people and go to our restaurants and stay in our hotels? Not certain about that. So I think our people need to stop playing the game of maybe Alabama and Ohio State and figure out what the next move in the evolution of football is.
Yeah, Bill, thanks for your call. That's great, Chuck. Very, very true is that, the economic impact of this cannot be it can be overstated, but it can't. I don't think you can understate what it means.
I saw those figures from Lubbock the other day. That's not any playing around with.
Yeah, and so again, you've got to find something that's gonna bring people and if you look at towns like Waco and Lubbock, Waco is fortunate in that we are between Austin and Dallas, so the it's easier to get here. Lubbock has Lubbock and Stillwater and Manhattan have problems.
Yeah, I used to live in Lubbock for a couple years, and that is just a drive, man. It's not a drive. I love Buddy Holly, and the Buddy Holly Museum was cool and all that, but I'm not making my way out to Lubbock to check out Buddy Holly's old stomping grounds unless I just I'm also coming from Arizona and have to stop through there. There's no reason for me or most people around the state to go to Lubbock just because of its location, although it's a great city once you get there. But as far as the 3D chess goes or 4D chess and all that, I'm totally with you. And that's why when Mac Rhodes, for example, he's been talking a lot about the streaming and what is that going to look like here in the next couple of years. Does Amazon get involved in college football to a major extent? If they do, then everything changes. Mm-hmm. And that's why ESPN wants to go ahead and lock all this down so they basically have a monopoly. And they don't want these grant of rights agreements to run out because then Amazon and potentially Fox, although they kind of are acting weird right now. Fox is sort of in a weird place. But, yeah, Apple and Amazon, they've got more money than ESPN does by a large margin. So they need to join the party, and then we can really see the options open up. But I don't think ESPN wants them to join the party, hence the move with Texas and Oklahoma. But you're right. They got to be thinking not just 5 years down the line, but 15 years down the line. And that's hard to do, but that's what they're going to have to do because obviously their brethren over in Austin and Norman, they were playing 4D chess, right? They were sitting there the last couple years at the bare minimum figuring out what their futures were going to look like. And meanwhile, the other 8 schools are sitting there just everything's good, everything's cool, no problems here. And yet those two were planning out their future. So, yeah, now it's time to get a little bit selfish while also maintaining that alliance that you have with the other 7 schools, but having to be selfish more than anything because Mac Rhodes isn't in charge of Iowa State. He's not in charge of Kansas. He's in charge of Baylor, just like the Kansas AD is in charge of Kansas. So, the streaming thing I think will be huge. But outside of that, I'm glad I'm not in that position because I have no idea where you would start as far as trying to get super ahead of the ball. And I'm sure that's what they're trying to figure out right now, but I totally agree with you.
All right, if you're on hold right now,